Anti-Semitism and Anti-Christianity. The title may sound peculiar, as the two are not very often treated together, and the latter topic is even very rarely discussed. For me, it is not only important to discuss both concepts together because I belong to both groups at the same time, but also because the enemy is increasingly attacking everything that belongs to Elohim, and because both peoples are chosen ones, Satan is in perpetual fight against them. In the analysis of anti-Semitism, both parties, anti-Semites and anti-fascists alike, make mistakes in the first steps. They examine the problem from a human, social, historical, political and economical perspective. But even if they approach the subject from a religious point of view, it is also usually very incomplete. There are very good examples within Judaism, but let's face it, there are a good number of very bad examples too. One party emphasizes the positive examples, while the other just focuses on the dark side of the chosen people. Everyone is led by its own interests. It would be high time to hear the views of people who are neither motivated by Jewish hatred, nor by its blind and false admiration, but by truth only. Anti-Semitism is a much discussed and even over-discussed topic. This overabundance is precisely making the situation worse. Because no matter how much hatred we faced throughout our history, the continuous and flood-like Jewish wailing we can experience from the early 90s to the present does not serve the memory of the martyrs and our better future, but on the contrary. Thinking as a Jew, it's fundamentally incomprehensible to me why our troubles and pain should be degraded into such a soap opera before the eyes of anyone. Why do we have to throw our pearls before the swines and then be astonished when they trample on them and on us by the same way? By the word swine, I mean those evil spirits leading many people to Jewish hatred. Furthermore, there are other Holocausts in the history that preceded ours. When was a film ever made about the extermination of the Armenians by the Turks, for example, or about the 5 million Africans slaughtered in the Belgian Congo, even if these ones were not the victims of hatred, but rather of the ramblings of a foolish king? But I could also mention perhaps the first and oldest genocide committed in Europe, when 2/3 of the ancient Hungarian population was also erased by Turkish sword during the 16th century. We can read a lot about the roots and causes of anti-Semitism on the internet. The writings are always unilaterally reflecting the interests of either party. On the anti-Semitic side, of course, they relativize the phenomenon and try to prove its legitimacy. On the other side, the slightest criticism against our people is considered as an anti-Semitic attack. Many may think that myself as a Jew, and because of the nature of our website, will clearly reflect the views of the latter category. That will not be the case. For my part, as for all other topics, the truth of Yahuwah is the only standard by which I dare to examine and declare anything. The subject of anti-Semitism, as it is served today, is misled by the two opposing sides, and the gap between them is growing bigger every day. In order to get a clear vision over the subject, only Yahuwah's perspective can be considered. We must come out of that two-dimensional, right-wing, left-wing, bilateral blindness that is veiling the truth about the nature of the Jewish people. One extremism is always feeding and strengthening the other in a never-ending swirl that has to be stopped one day. The root of anti-Semitism. Well, it is very simple, and in one word, Satan himself is the real and only root of anti-Semitism. The root is that what Elohim owns is all and above all what the enemy hates the most. Thus the two chosen people, the firstborn, the Jew, and the second one, those who are born again in the Messiah, are the true groups of people whom Satan mainly attacks and wants to expropriate and put under his rule. He also tries to turn both people against each other and to make them a subject of disgust in the eyes of the outsiders. He hates them and wants you to hate them too. If you happen to be part of one of the two people, he will strive to make you hate the other one. Satan's chosen people. As Satan always tries to steal everything that belongs to Elohim and makes it appear as if it was his, thus no one should be surprised at the claim that if the Jewish people is the chosen people of Elohim, it is automatically Satan's chosen people as well. This means that you will be increasingly tempted by him as your alliance with Yahuwah is effective. Indeed, he does not need to fight much for those who are not part of Yahuwah's covenants. The purpose is simple. The enemy tries to convince as many people as he can that what belongs to Elohim, what is related to him, and even Elohim himself, is simply worth avoiding. For that he slanders the Jewish people and Christianity in the eyes of each other and before the world. Since most of Jews are still not in the Messiah, nor is the majority of Christianity born again in him, but most of them are merely by outward admirers, thus by inciting hatred of one another, he manages to root even deeper each side in the state of religiousness in which they already are. Christians' hatred against Jews, past persecutions, replacement theology, and the cult of Jesus spiced with an army of idols only reinforce Jews in their denial of the Messiah. And conversely, Talmudic excesses do not serve to bring back Christendom into its original roots. Jews and religious Christians do not realize that both should return to the original biblical source, the Word, and abandon all the rabbinical and Christian denominational deposits in order to finally rediscover the true essence of Yahushua, the one who settled in us, the disciples, in Jerusalem, 50 days following the resurrection of Yahushua on Shavuot. The tools of discrediting. To make the people hate the whole Jewish people, the enemy uses the world's oldest tactic, discredit. He is slandering as long as most of the people start to believe what he says. And he is not always lying from scratch, but bases his lies upon reality. Indeed, he uses some people who are from among us, people who are Jews by their origins, and manipulates their life in order to make them hateful, and most of all, to accuse the whole nation to be the same as these rotten ones. This is how he is able to cast a bad light on the whole people. Psychologically, mankind basically strives for simplification in a very primitive way. If a man sees a native African eating his neighbor, for example, when he returns home, he will say that all the Africans are cannibals, that no one should go there, and that it might even be smarter to get rid of them before they come and eat us as well. This is how inquisitions and pogroms were born, until the final solution of the Nazis. Our Jewish cannibals are those who are no longer willing to keep their ancestral faith, who consciously accept other spiritual dominations. Here I am not specifically thinking of Jews assimilated in other religions, but of those who are openly or covertly belonging to the Antichrist through their political and ideological convictions, or by simply being the members of any kind of Messianic society. We all know about these individuals, families, dynasties, who are in the full service of the mammon and who have built real economical empires that are increasingly dominating the world. Unfortunately, these are not a handful of people, but I estimate their number to be of several thousands of individuals who are from Jewish descent, but whose life is so far entirely dedicated to inciting anti-Semitism and preparing for the coming of the Antichrist. They are the ones who shoot almost every third Hollywood movie over the subject of the Shoah, living off the blood of their own people like vampires, while inciting frustration in the crowds of the other nations by artificially exciting guilt in them. We have common ancestors by blood, but we no longer have a common Father and Lord. Some of them did never have anyway, because demons often take control of Jewish bodies and inhabit them. But sometimes, the demons themselves are simply born into Jewish flesh and are committing crimes through them in order to generate anti-Semitism. In what follows, we will see further tools used by Satan in order to accuse the Jewish people. Some are pure and dumb lies, although others are based on reality but are largely deviated from it. Blood libel. In the 19th century's Europe, it was a well-known and proven method of generating anti-Semitism. Of course, even the dumbest Talmudic law does not call on any Jew to kill a person, mostly a child, and make food out of its blood. The most primitive thing is to think that Jews, who take the ban on blood consumption very seriously, will spice up their unleavened bread with any kind of blood. There is no basis for this accusation, and there never was. Talmudic perversions. Jewish literature is often accused of racism and incitement to hatred. These kind of statements can really be found in many places within the rabbinical literature. Indeed, the continued millennial hostility of the nations against Jews did not really develop a sense of sympathy and love towards them among our people. Rabbinical literature is many times misinterpreting and gives false teachings about the status of chosen people. Like many other topics, this one is also degraded to a human level. Thus, it is not surprising that a people who suffered so many violence and discrimination from the majority of the other nations is really suffering from a huge minority complex and tries to somehow compensate for its frustrations. Psychology has long known and studied this process. This is not only true in case of individuals, but also entire communities, ethnic groups, and nations can be affected by it. In spirit, however, it is by no means acceptable. Our election does not make us kings over the other peoples, but as stated in another of my writings, we have been chosen to serve. See my teaching named Chosen People. Just as Yahuwah took on the smallest role, although being the greatest, when he washed his disciples' feet, he did it so that we would always remember and remain humble. Our election simply means that we are the firstborn among the nations. As in a normal family, the younger kids do not serve the elders, but on the contrary, the elders do have responsibilities towards the youngest. Elder brothers and sisters are assisting the parents in the education of the little ones. We sometimes have to feed, to cook, to wash, to look after, and teach our little brothers and sisters. What we already know should be passed on immediately to them. This is the only way how the concept of chosen people should be interpreted. Any other interpretation is to be considered as anathema. But indeed, this also implies that the youngers must give special respect to their elders. Traditional Jewry has fallen out of this role for a time, so they can no longer be blamed for not making the right duty in the period between the rejection of the Messiah and its recognition in the end times. But this is not an excuse for their sin of misinterpreting their election and thus feeding the anger of others, in a word, fueling anti-Semitism. The enemy also smuggled the defamation tool of pedophilia into the already fundamentally antichrist Jewish literature. No matter how many Jews try to explain the opposite, the Talmud makes clear pedophilic statements, such as how and under what circumstances this thing is allowed. For Jews, this is a stain that some are trying to reinterpret, others are denying, but most remain silent on the subject, and in the worst case, even go so far as to accept and teach it, as I myself saw it in a French-speaking video on YouTube. Should this extremely open aberration hidden in the Talmud be an alarm bell for all Jews who are still believing in it, unveiling how far the Zohar, the Mishnah, the Gemara and the Talmud are from the Torah? World conspiracy theory, which indeed is not a theory, but an increasingly obvious reality. As I mentioned before, the enemy also uses large number of members amongst our people to carry out his evil plan. But their number is still negligible compared to the total number of people involved in this conspiracy. Indeed, you will find much more people among them who have been baptized than who are circumcised. Yet most of those who are standing in the foreground are primarily those of Jewish descent. They sit in the most upscale chairs, and it seems that in essence, they are the ones who are pulling the strings. Indeed, blessed with a valuable knowledge and life experience of more than 3,500 years, our survival instinct is so developed that we are practically all able to serve any cause in a very effective way, whether good or whether bad, the service of Yahuwah or even the Antichrist. The problem here too is generalization, which is also sought to be confirmed by pamphlet such as the well-known Protocol of the Wise Men of Zion, which had obviously been written by some Cossacks rather than Jews. The book was written in a style, a spirituality, and scope, just a few pages, that is very alien to the Jewish way of thinking. The document clearly serves the purpose of convincing the peoples that the whole Jewish community is striving for world domination. The discreditation of the body of the Messiah of the true Christianity, the degradation of the concept of Christianity in the good sense to Christianity in the wrong sense, has been ongoing the same way for 2,000 years. Here also, pedophilia is one of the most widely used means of defamation. Everyone knows about the many scandals caused by the perversions of idolatrous priests called Christians. The problem, however, goes beyond simply destroying the reputation of their own church, since the Roman Church was basically created by the enemy in order to weaken and get hold of the body of the Messiah. The problem is that outsiders, including Jews themselves, make no distinction between Christians. Hearing this kind of scandalous news, Jews, Muslims, or any other people will not really feel the urge to join a Christian community and hear about the Savior and the Gospel. We need to know that in the eyes of Jews and other non-Christian groups, Catholicism and all the other Christian denominations are the same. As most of us don't really make difference between Sunni and Shiite Islam, for example, or the Satmar and the Lithuanian Jewish Orthodoxy. Thus, the authority of the Church itself, the body of the Messiah, is torn down by anyone who commits any sin as a person pretending to be a priest of Yahushua. But there is no need to list the other and more frequently used weapons, sins and their memories, like substitute theology, inquisitions, crusades, pogroms, holocausts, etc., which are not exactly serving the conversion of Jews to the Messiah. But a huge attack against the body of the Messiah is also taking place when denominations are not in brotherly relationship, but in war against each other. How would you like even a Catholic to embark on the path of Reformation when most of what they see amongst Protestants is faction and chaos. Understandably, many of them prefer staying in their own church, although being false with its set of multiple idols, but still granting them a certain feeling of peace and unity. Meanwhile, Protestants beat each other until they suffocate so much that they end up going back under the ecumenical wing of the Roman Church to find shelter, being exhausted of centuries of spiritual fight. This is how Satan destroys what Reformation has ever given to the world. In my opinion, the later process is the worst anti-Christian tool since the Reformation began. The question may arise, is there any legitimate anti-Semitism? Definitely yes. Based on the facts described above, does anyone still have any doubts about this? There are good anti-Semites, or more precisely, there is no good anti-Semitism. But anti-Semitism can come from a good root, and good also can come out from anti-Semitism. Although this is only true for the victim, the Jew, the one from which any form of anti-Semitism comes, does always put himself under a curse. I would like to remind my people that anti-Semitism, for us, is none other than a biblical promise. Indeed, in the Torah, we receive the promise through Moses that as soon as we depart from the will and law of Yahuwah, we will be persecuted by foreign nations. These are the curses and diseases that have been proclaimed on Mount Ebal. Of course, this is not an excuse for the anti-Semites, but there are many anti-Semites who would not dare to harm us if we were doing our job properly, and they do not suffer from visceral hatred or murderous instincts. Their hatred comes from the outside and increases in them when, for example, they look at us. When does this happen? Let's say, when a person seeks the truth according to the laws of Elohim engraved in his own heart, which truth has been entrusted to us. However, when he finds us, he sees that we are not only carrying the Torah, but a bunch of other human laws, which are often so foolish and vile as to attribute them to Elohim is a blasphemy in itself. This irritates any non-Jewish individual which heart is seeking for truth. Thus, their sympathy for us is greatly diminished. Or worse, when we don't even carry the Torah with us anymore, and the question is, why are we at all? But even worse than that is when we do not only leave the Torah, but throw it away, humiliate it, by preaching just the opposite of what is written in the law. This includes ideologies like democracy, socialism, or capitalism, the propaganda of all forms of libertinism, drugs, sexual aberrations, etc. This is what happens when, as a Jew, instead of being in a synagogue, you sit in a parliament and speak all kinds of nonsense instead of preaching the Torah. This is also the case when on Saturday, instead of observing the Shabbat, you go out and participate or even organize gay prides, showing up all kinds of queers and transvestites under the eyes of Goyim, who just wanted to have a good walk with their family and children and may not necessarily wanted to be the witnesses of this kind of festival. When though you are not openly and consciously a Freemason, but you still accept its spirituality and serve it as a puppet, saying, never any Holocaust and violence again, let us blindly accept everyone at all costs. I also know a chief rabbi, into brackets of course. We have only one rabbi, it is Yahuwah, and no one should be named like that, but he's a traditional Jew, so he is considered as an official rabbi, who on Shabbat offices happily reads in Hebrew from the Torah how men sleeping with each other should be stoned to death. And then from Sunday to Friday, he keeps on posting articles supporting homosexuality on social media. What a great sense of integrity. Meanwhile, the enemy explodes with joy, as you are carrying out the Holocaust and accomplishing the final solution in yourself. And all this at the most effective level, since you are killing yourself in spirit. Hitler himself did only manage to destroy your ancestors in the flesh. You are doing even better than him. And there is even the case where Jews blindly defend certain minorities and their rights, while not expecting any sense of responsibility from them in return. We do this by speaking out from our good little safe and minority-free Jewish neighborhoods, calling fascist and racist anyone from the majority who dare criticize and complain against the ethnic groups they are forced to live with. Many are outraged because they are vulnerable and forced to live with those whose laziness, unwillingness to work, and crimes have simply changed their lives into hell. No one is protecting the members of the majority against these minorities that are in some places clearly representing majority of the population. Nor the politics, nor the police is doing anything to grant a better and safer life for those constrained to live with these people. Who is going to protect these from problematic people? You have no idea of what it's like to live among such population, but you blindly accuse these victims who cannot do otherwise than live in such neighborhoods, not having the financial resources to break out of their ghettos. Are you surprised that these people don't sympathize with you in return? Are you surprised that those who you call fascist finally end up to turn to be so, and that it will be first on your face that they will spit? Are you surprised that many introduce electricity into their fences, that militias, self-defense groups and guards are being set up? Isn't it our responsibility somewhere? And who speaks of the fact that in doing so, it is the emerging members of these problematic minorities who are damaged the most, being blindly rejected, although they are struggling a lot to be recognized as full members of the society they live in? If we really consider these matters, that they are legitimate forms or rather causes of anti-Semitism for which a great part of the Jewish community is also responsible. But as I mentioned before, this kind of anti-Semitism is also our hope, a signal that shows us how far we have deviated from the right path. This anti-Semitism is like when a doctor says that something goes wrong. It's not good to hear, but without that, no healing process could ever begin. We received this promise through Moses. It is time to recognize and deal with the subject. We should finally assume our responsibilities in place of hiding behind the anti-Semite accusation. However, this kind of good anti-Semitism is only good for the Jew. Satan's supreme will is make you hate everything that belongs to Yahuwah, and don't think that any perversion of the Jews entitles you to hate them, even if hatred is a natural consequence of our sins. Yahuwah said to his disciples, "Things that cause people to stumble are bound to come, but woe to anyone through whom they come." This also applies to this case. Do not fall into these two opposite traps: hatred on the one hand and tolerance on the other. As hatred puts you automatically under curse no matter who you hate. But in the case of Elohim's chosen people, it can happen to have even worse consequences in your life. We have to distinguish between sin and man. We must learn and ask Yahuwah so that we can love the sinner while not giving up the hatred of sin. This is a very difficult thing, and only Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, can operate this in us. Visceral anti-Semitism. In contrast, there is the kind of hatred that I call visceral anti-Semitism, when it doesn't matter whether Jews do the right thing or not, whether their relationship with Elohim is in order or not. But even if you are Jewish and born again in the Messiah, He will always want your loss. There is a kind of hatred that is ultimate and unlimited, and which is clearly demonic. There are people possessed by demons, but there are also demons that have become human. Only prayer and the hand of Yahuwah can protect against these. Such was the root of any historical event that intended to hurt and destroy the Jewish people, from Esau through Haman, the Cossacks, the Nazis, to this day with Hamas and its companions, which will end up in Armageddon and 1,000 years later in Gog and Magog. The election of the Jewish people is supported by massive evidence. It is not only described in the Old Testament, but the Savior was also from among us, and despite our small number and historical difficulties, the fact that we are still alive is obviously supernatural. Following the denial of the Messiah, much of our people were put under quarantine and not rejected. The blood of the Messiah was and will be upon us, as our ancestor then stated before Pilate, until we individually accept this blood for the remission of our sins. What is still preventing anyone from recognizing that our survival to this day is a completely irrational fact? Blindness or stupidity, or the above-mentioned visceral spirit? The Messiah alone is able to heal you from those diseases, such as He is the one who can free Jews from Judaism and all other kind of perversions. They have been trying to exterminate, to destroy, to expel us almost every 50 years, for 3,500 years, yet we still remain. We are one of the smallest people in the world. It is historically and sociologically impossible for such nation to survive for so long. There is only one people besides us who are as old as we are, the Chinese. They are the other extreme, and the key to their survival is precisely their immeasurable number. Only the hand of the Almighty is able to make a people like us survive for so long. If you are unable to see this, ask for vision and deliverance from the Messiah, because among other things, there will be no anti-Semite in the kingdom of heaven, even if they had a very good reason to be so. Philosemitism. As I mentioned in the text earlier, any blind and humanistic stance is a form of extremism that only generates and fuels anti-Semitism and hatred in general. Philosemitism, the defense of the Jew at all costs, is a source of hatred and sometimes even turns into a murderer of the Jewish identity, finding no other solution to fight against hatred than to want to suppress all forms of identity, of communitarism, and transforming all human beings into individual citizens of the world. A lot of Philosemites deny the existence of the Jewish nation, considering it as an invention of history linked, according to them, to primitive religious traditions. Many defenders of the Jews, including many Jews themselves, are therefore sometimes worse than the anti-Semites, because the latter, at least, do not deny the presence and existence of the Jewish people. The Philosemites, on their side, strive to suppress anti-Semitism by suppressing Semitism itself, which is a major and ultimate act of anti-Semitism. When will we finally stop putting all Jews in the same basket, even in the Philosemitic and anti-racist side? As long as we do not distinguish between the Jews who are for good and do not harm anyone, of those who came out of our ranks to endorse other ideologies, to serve other gods, idols like money, in some cases even Lucifer himself. If we do not distinguish between bad apples and ripe apples, how can we expect anti-Semites to do so? Because the anti-Semites have accusations that are legitimate in the case of some Jews, like the big bankers and other financial magnates. But through the latter, they accuse the entire Jewish community. On the other hand, the defenders of the Jews and the Jews themselves defend the entire Jewish community, including those towards whom the accusations of mass manipulation are legitimate. By wanting to defend too much and disregard the rotten apples that are among us, let us not be surprised, on the one hand, that people are making the amalgam between us and these rotten apples, and on the other hand, that after a while we end up becoming rotten as well. By dint of defending them, we unconsciously end up endorsing their ideas, serving the same idols, and putting ourselves under the same curses. Anti-Zionism. The latest and most fashionable version of anti-Semitism is Anti-Zionism. It is also an interesting mutant of the previous versions because it infects much more widely, reaching not only some age groups, but all generations and ideologic classes. This variant can also reach humanists and left liberal-wing people and even Jews themselves. Those who are not inclined to classical anti-Semitism can now try on this new form of rebellion. The reason is similar to the biased protection of poor and fallen minorities I mentioned above. You can read more about this topic in Jewish State and Zionism, my next teaching, which is a kind of continuation of the current one.